And welcome, everybody. So, we are here, second episode of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. I noticed yesterday I made a pretty big mistake when I was recording, and I kept referring to defensive minded head coaches as defensive minded head quarterbacks, which there really aren't any. And the point I was making was defensive minded head coaches generally need a once in a generational talent at quarterback, and Robert Saleh has that now, so there's a lot of expectation on him regarding that. But nonetheless, we move forward. Last night was UFC 293, Adesanya and Strickland, and like the rest of the world, besides Chris Curtis and Eric Nixick, I got it pretty wrong. I thought Izzy was going to be able to control the distance, make his reads in the first round, and then sometime between the second and third get a finish. I did not see Strickland dominating him the way that he did. And the scary part about the fight, let me get into this part first. It kind of takes a guy like Strickland, who seems to not care what happens to him, to be the guy that gets right in Izzy's face and says, let's just throw back and forth. Strickland has an odd style. He's very defensive, and his defense turns into offense. He has a longer jab than most guys his height. He's very good at that. To be honest, he probably could have landed a lot more. And what he did worked, so I'm not going to sit here and say that he fought a bad fight because of the things he didn't do. The things he did worked incredibly well. He had Izzy on his back foot. I don't think Izzy expected that. And he just seemed to... He found the right time to have the perfect performance, which oddly enough happened to be exactly 100 UFCs in Australia also from when Holly Holm did that to Ronda Rousey. Because Holly Holm has never fought the same perfect fight that she did that night against Rousey. Holly Holm was perfect that night, and Strickland was pretty perfect last night. He dropped him in the first, which I don't think was expected. He pretty much just won on 1-2s, and then later in the fight started utilizing some body kicks. He probably could have mixed in takedowns more. And then if you think about Izzy, Izzy's not a wrestler. He's a striker, but he used takedowns on Pereira. I'm surprised he didn't mix any in last night. Strickland fought Izzy the same way Pereira did, where he walked him down. The difference is Pereira's all offense. He's not a defensive guy. He's going to sit there and say, we're going to trade, and my bombs are probably bigger than yours. Yours just have to land. And that's why he ended up losing the second fight to Izzy. Strickland is defensive, and he gets in your face. And what he did last night was pretty amazing. I'm not a Strickland fan. I'm not a Strickland hater. He's just never been a guy that is one of the guys that I root for, the same way I root for guys like Volkanovski. I'm a big Ilya Topuria fan. A couple other guys in there like that. But congratulations to that guy. And you could see the magnitude of it hitting him when he won. Nobody expected it, and sometimes this is what happens. You're playing with house money. You walk in there and you're going to smash somebody, and it's a big congratulations to him on that. And if you look at his physique, you could tell how hard he trained. He looked really good. Tai Tuivasa actually looked really good. He looked like he had leaned out a little bit more. He's still heavy. I think he was still 263.5 or 264.5. He was right at the limit. And he actually looked good. And for the amount of damage he was taking in the fight, you could tell he was very conditioned because he was still there until the damage just caught up to him. And the skills caught up to him. He's not a guy that's been training his whole life. Volkov is. Volkov is a hard guy to deal with. And Volkov looked like he tightened up a little bit more in the defense, wasn't getting hit with the big bombs that sometimes he gets hit with. But overall, tremendous performance by Sean Strickland. I have nothing bad to say about it. Congratulations to that guy. Even Izzy congratulated him. What does Izzy do from here? I think he's going to move up to 205. It's probably not easy for him to make 85 anymore. He could probably go to 205. I think the strength will get him a little bit, but it'll be interesting. And it's always sad when you see the guy who seemed to be unbeatable start to come down. We have that a little bit now with Usman because he's lost two in a row to Leon, so where does he go? Holloway's been stuck there forever because he can beat everybody at featherweight except for Volkanovski. And maybe Ilia Topuria. I'm hoping Topuria and Holloway have a 5-rounder um, in Spain like Topuria wants, or maybe even Hawaii. I was of the belief that Topuria was going to be the one that was going to take down Volkanovski. After both of their last fights, I don't think that's the case, at least not if they fought now. Maybe it would be a case like Mighty Mouse and Cejudo, where they fight one time, and then the second time they fight, the challenger wins. I don't think Topuria is ready for it. He's so good, though, but he's super young. He's got dynamite in his hands. He has an excellent ground game. He's pretty good defensively, but you could tell sometimes he gets too caught up in his power, and he just starts winging shots. And against a guy like Volkanovski, that's not going to work. Like, you can catch Volkanovski, and that might be what it's going to take, but Volkanovski is just on a different level than pretty much anybody in the UFC. And I say that above John Jones because John Jones has never fought anybody bigger than him. Everybody's taller than Volkanovski. And as a short guy myself who fought at 145, I respect the shit out of Volkanovski for that. So regardless, we're not talking about him. We're talking about Sean Strickland. What a night last night. I will say this. I was a little disappointed that the card was starting on American time. I think there's something to say about a fighter's performance when they're fighting at an odd time. Some of these guys fight in Abu Dhabi, and their fights are like 6 in the morning. That's no way to fucking go out and compete at the highest level. They don't start NFL games that are played in Europe on American time. You'll wake up and those games are starting at 9 in the morning. There's absolutely no fucking reason to have these cards on American time. You know, I don't like the fact that it starts at 10 and I'm on the East Coast. It should start at 9. Dana White did that one time, and a few people complained, and this motherfucker changes it back to 10 o'clock. Like, fuck you, bro. It wasn't even a good pay-per-view. It was a pay-per-view that not a lot of interest was in. And then he's like, well, the pay-per-view numbers were down because it started early. No, you had a shit card. But sometimes, last night it wasn't too bad, but if the first 4 fights go to decision, or 3 out of the first 4 fights go to decision, sometimes it's a long night. On the East Coast, like, when you're an adult and you're 40 years old and you're not out partying like you did when you were 20, like, I don't want to fucking deal with that shit. I actually went to sleep before the O'Malley Sterling fight because I was like, fuck this. This is taking way too long. So I think there's something to say about when you're a fighter and you're fighting at an odd time. Sydney's 14 hours ahead of where I am. That fight was on a little after midnight last night. So they're fighting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's probably cool because you don't have all day to sit around and think about what's going to happen that night and how it's going to go down. But at the same time, you're kind of like, it throws off your rhythm. You're used to fighting at a certain time, and now you're fighting way earlier. I'm not making excuses for anybody because everybody has to suffer under the same thing. But that shit, people deal differently with that. Some people can handle that. Some people can't. Every time I fought, I was usually, ironically enough, like the fight right before the intermission or the fight right after intermission. And I liked being like that. I wouldn't want to have to wait to be the main event. When you fight in local shows, a lot of the people that show up at local shows are people that are there to see 1 or 2 specific people or to just see people from their gym. And when those people are done competing, people empty out. So the main event is sometimes emptier than the very first fight. It's just how it is. So back to the UFC, because I kind of going on a little bit of a ramble. Congratulations to Sean Strickland. That was an awesome performance. Next week we have the rematch of Grasso and Shevchenko. I was super surprised at the first fight between Grasso and Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko took her lightly. Shevchenko was doing a lot of things in that fight that she normally doesn't do. And as a competitor, sometimes when you think that you just have an advantage somewhere, you'll do things that aren't by the book because you think you can get away with it, and she couldn't get away with it. So I think Grasso was a little bit better than Shevchenko thought she was going to be. And I think Shevchenko paid for it. I think Shevchenko can come back and get her belt back, probably by a decision, but it's going to be an interesting fight regardless. Other than that, we just finished up the early afternoon NFL games. Like I've said, I'll do a thing about this on Tuesday, talking about some of the teams. This is primarily a Buffalo Bills channel, and Buffalo doesn't play until Monday night. I will say that what I look forward to in the first couple weeks of the season, I don't necessarily take it serious, the wins and losses, but what I look for is, did this team, or does this team look like they have improved on what their shortcomings were last year? So just now I was watching the Vikings and the Buccaneers, and I don't know if the Buccaneers winning means that they're a good team, because Minnesota could turn out to be a bad team. But what I did see a lot of was Kirk Cousins getting blitzed and fumbling the ball. I think 2 out of the first 3 drives he did that. And that was one of his problems last year. They weren't chipping out of the backfield really well. You can't have the first drive and have Micah Parsons strip sack your quarterback. This is like a game they had last year. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, how do they not have it figured to at least give this guy protection for the first few drives? And the Antoine Winfield strip sack was beautiful. It was piss poor on Kirk Cousins for not seeing that coming, or for the coaches not having blocking lined up for that. That's just an example of things that seem to have not been fixed from the year before. That's my problem with Buffalo. Every fucking year, Buffalo seems to make the same mistake over and over again. Josh Allen seems to make a lot of dumb plays. Josh Allen seems to fumble the ball a lot and throw a lot of unnecessary interceptions, a lot of penalties, a lot of silly play calls on third down. And we'll get into that, but that's primarily what I look for the first few episodes, or first few games of the season is, does this team look like they're improved from last year on what they didn't do well, or does this team look like they're making the same mistakes that they made last year, and it's just going to be a repeat of that? And that's why you have teams like New England who have 20-year dynasties, because they have a great quarterback and a great coach that's going to sit there and improve on any mistakes that they may have made the year before. Kansas City's kind of doing that. They lost the other day, but it's the first game of the season. They didn't have Kelsey. Their defense allowed 14 points, and a bunch of their receivers had trouble catching the ball. They didn't have a problem with drops last year. This seems to be a new problem. I'll bet in 11 days it gets figured out, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kadarius Toney has a really good game against Jacksonville. But we'll get to all the games on Tuesday, mostly talking about Buffalo. We're going to talk about a little bit of Tennessee. But I just wanted to kind of do this impromptu episode really because of how surprised I was with Strickland. If it was an easy Izzy win, I probably wouldn't be doing it. I was just so surprised, and I wanted to give my thoughts on that just from a technical standpoint. And like I said, he got right in his face. He's not afraid of Izzy. Strickland seems like the kind of guy that's not afraid of getting concussions. He probably accepted a long time ago that he's going to lose brain cells and doesn't care. He probably wouldn't want to be an 80-year-old guy in a walker. He'd probably rather crash his motorcycle at 50 and die like a fucking warrior, like a maniac, because he's kind of like that. And I guess that's the kind of guy that you need to get right in Izzy's face and beat him. You either need a guy like Pereira, who's going to sit there and make you defensive and hit you with bombs and hope he doesn't get hit with one like he did in the second fight, or you're going to have a guy like Strickland who just has a weird style. He's going to get in your face. He's not going to let you breathe. He's going to pressure you. The guy spars so much, he's not going to get tired, which is why Izzy should have wrestled. You got to wrestle a guy and at least make him think of something. Strickland didn't take his corner's advice. He half-assed attempted one takedown, but in reality, he was just like kind of going with what he wanted to go. And to be honest, I saw a lot of openings that he had. Every time Izzy would back up and stop, that's when he's throwing. And I thought what Strickland should have done is as soon as he stops, cork a right hand at him. For some reason, Strickland kept moving to his left, which is usually bad against somebody who's in an orthodox stance because you're moving towards their power. And it was letting Izzy be able to easily slip Strickland's right hands when he would throw them. And the 4th and 5th, he really picked it up, but he could have given away the 3rd round. He probably gave away the 2nd by not pulling the trigger enough. And I definitely saw a lot of openings for his right hand. Just the way he was able to line up, he would just move the opposite way. So if you're thinking about it, if I have my right hand ready to go, I don't want to move to my left and throw, because if you move to your left, I'm hitting nothing. We're kind of crossing like this. What I want to do is move towards where I want to throw and then throw it to the right of where and see if I can catch you slipping that way. His corner gave him great advice when he talked about aiming for Izzy's chest when he's against the fence, because Izzy would square up and kind of do this and then shoot out to one side. And right there, when you get a guy that puts his hands down and does this, I'm going to shoot a front kick right at your fucking chest and see how you like it. And if you happen to bounce off the cage, then you're running into an uppercut or a straight right hand. But regardless, what Strickland did worked, and he won the fight. Congratulations to him. I can't say it enough. And like I said, I'm not even a fan of the guy. I don't dislike him. I'm just not a guy that I naturally just wake up and say, man, that's a guy that I really want to watch fight. There are certain fighters, and as you progress in life and you get better at MMA, there's a lot less people that you're a fan of because you look at them and you're like, man, like, how are you at a high level and you're making the same mistakes? But you have guys that blow your mind like Volkanovski does for me. Like Volkanovski is a crazy good fighter, and I could name a few others, but he's just the one right now that seems to be like on point with everything. But yeah, that's that for this episode. I appreciate everybody joining. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We're going to be doing a lot of episodes. We're also going to be following my family's journey back into jiu-jitsu. It's been a long time since I've taken jiu-jitsu seriously, and it's going to be an interesting journey being 40 years old and getting back into a sport that you loved for so long and then built a love-hate relationship. My wife is the same way, but you have to improve as a person. Sometimes you have to walk through that fire. So stay tuned on that. And until then, I'll see you guys on Tuesday for the post-game analysis for Buffalo. Take care until then.